I witnessed, recorded, and produced these videotapes of the Washington, D.C. hearing. Their authenticity is above question.
This is produced as part of the ongoing work on the website, thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
This is a hearing about the government licensing the electrocution of people to cause grand mal seizures. Think of the millions of dollars, taxpayers' money, spent to pay psychiatrists and their supporters and for the worldwide travel in putting this conference together, while the victims and opponents had to pay their own way.
My question is to Dr. Breggin. Is there anything in the interesting data presented to us by Dr. Dan which requires reconsideration of your conclusions about the neuropathology of ECT? And if there is, why so? Or if not, why not?
I'll make it as brief as I can. First of all, her study with rats really are absurd. Rats are so resistant to brain damage, and that's very well. They have huge skulls and tiny brains inside them proportionally. Secondly, it's as if she systematically attempted not to find damage. She checks the animals 2 to 12 weeks after their treatments. And Hartelius was very clear in his review of the literature and his own work that the damage is most clearly seen 48 hours after the trauma, because that's when you can see the dead and the dying cells. And after that, there's less and less that's visible because the actual evidence of the damage disappears. The studies on rats are really not worthwhile. The idea that and she's acknowledging that to some extent studies do show brain damage with epilepsy. The idea that epilepsy itself will cause more damage than epilepsy plus electroshock, that is plus electricity, just makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, we know that some epileptics at least do get brain damage. The idea that if we induce it electrically, it's safer than when it develops spontaneously, it seems to me is so absurd as to not require a response. But I'll give it a brief one. And that is, we know the mechanism of damage from electroshock. It's not obscure. We have angiography on open skull animals. We have angiography on closed skull animals. And we know that when you put the smallest electrostimulation, very small, a few amps, across the whole brain, all of the blood vessels go into spasm. And when the vessels go into spasm, two things happen. And these are, again, cited in the papers I gave to you. Two things happen. The spasm cuts off all the oxygenation to the cells. They blanch. The whole area becomes white and receives no oxygen and no blood cells. And secondly, and we know this going all the way back to the 1940s with Leo Alexander, who was a shock promoter. Secondly, the blood vessel walls break down. So that if you put a dye in a blood vessel in the brain, and you give it just a minimum stimulation, provided it's generalized, the dye will extravasate into the brain. It will break through the blood-brain barrier. So we know the mechanisms of shock damage, and it is really silly to claim that you're more likely to get it in spontaneous epilepsy than with epilepsy that's produced by an insult to the brain.
Thank you.
One shock treatment can equal 150 joules of energy. This is equal to dropping a hammer on someone's head from higher than a 5-story building.
At the FDA hearings, the testimony on the reclassification of electroconvulsive devices cited the literature as whether signed or pulsed, typically about 150 joules of energy in a treatment. With the new Thymatron electroconvulsive device, if you check out at 400 volts, maximum of 0.9 amps, and 320-some millisecond pulses.
Could you finish up your question, your remarks?
Yeah, I would like somebody to tell me. I'm a teacher as well as a physicist, and I brought a kilogram with me. Teachers like to demonstrate. This is a kilogram. It's 2.2 pounds. Heavier than a hammer used to hit an amp. I wonder if possibly like Dr. Stein could tell me how high I would have to drop this kilogram from in order to have it hit the ground with 150 joules of energy.
I don't know if that question is in the purview of the panel, but thank you for your report. I'd like to go on to the next person.
This is only 10 joules of energy. You're talking about dropping it from higher than a 5-story building. That's physics. Supposedly you pre-met that drop.
Thank you.
I never got
All right, out with your gun. Out with your gun.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
Oh, dabble, do you? Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well,
Now just bite down on it.
oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.